The following story is also available as a read-only version. Check the link in the description if you're interested. The Lone Stall bobbed up and down as the pontoon was hit by the bow wave of a cargo superliner passing in the distance. The tiny bottles lining the shelves clinked together, but the lights inside them remained undisturbed. They came in all colors, hues, and shapes. A dancing flame of robin blue stood between a cylinder of faintly glowing olive smoke and a bright scarlet orb bouncing frantically in its vial. Siobhan sat in a plastic folding chair, grey hair bound together in a ponytail, back aching. A tiny stereo next to the register was playing Irish folk music, barely loud enough to be heard over the creaking of the float. Beyond the skyscrapers of the city centre, the last rosy orange rim of sunlight was becoming thinner and thinner. She turned around, looking at the open ocean, speckled with congregations of small boats, drifting pontoons, and several cruise ships straddling the horizon. "There's a storm coming," she said, looking at Cliff. The young man, who was leaning against the streetlight, stopped playing with his straight razor. He wore faded jeans, a frayed shirt, and a rotting leather jacket. His lips were pierced together with a small padlock. He gave Siobhan a solemn nod and began extending the tarpaulin to protect the wares. A figure emerged from the shadows down the street. Most people would have noticed his distinctive apparel, but even from far away Siobhan recognized him by his sagacious eyes. He wore an old-fashioned black suit and a top hat. The gold chain of his pocket watch gleamed in the lantern light, and his walking stick clacked rhythmically upon the ground. "Dr. Nagata!" Siobhan greeted when the man approached her stall. "We haven't seen you here in a while."
"My dear Siobhan, you look younger and more beautiful than ever." Nagata gave her a smile and a slight bow. "Have you been perusing your own wares?"
Siobhan giggled, letting him believe that his flattery was having any effect.
"We don't carry that kind of soul," she lied. "You never know if they come from legitimate sources."
"They so rarely do," Dr. Nagata agreed. "I've come here dead set on spending my money, so what do you have for me?"
"That depends on what you need. We have a middle-aged father of 6 who died in a car crash last week," Siobhan said.
The sentence wasn't even finished when Cliff was already getting the right bottle from the shelf and handed it to Nagata. Inside was a heavy grey fog that filled only the lower half of the vial. A dense patch of what looked like a coiled worm clung to the bottom.
"Worn out and depressed," Nagata observed. "I can't give this to my patients, not if I want to cure them."
Siobhan forced herself to smile. She knew full well that his patients were not always looking to be fixed. He had purchased souls in a much worse state from her before.
"This is a young woman. Some would describe her as a social butterfly. Died of a drug overdose, poor thing, but it's made her more invigorating."
Cliff handed the doctor a vial containing a cyclone of pink lightning bolts flashing through a light rose mist. Nagata inspected it with a wistful look, then gave it back immediately.
"I'm sorry, Siobhan, but I really cannot engage in our usual dance tonight. Time is pressing."
The hair on Siobhan's back rose. She scanned her surroundings, looking for something out of the ordinary. Men were laughing and drinking beer on a fishing cutter moving slowly toward the port nearby. A vagrant was peering over the roof on a nearby warehouse, and a late-night delivery van was passing by on the road.
"If only you told me what you were looking for, Doctor, then I could provide it," she said carefully.
She didn't know what, but something was wrong. Cliff seemed to notice her agitation, touching the pocket of his jacket where the straight razor was stowed. Dr. Nagata seemed fully at ease.
"I suppose I do want to do a little bit of dancing," he admitted. "I have a lot of money, and not a lot of space to carry things home in."
That made Siobhan even more nervous. Nagata was the opposite of acerbic on the best of days, but today it sounded like he was deliberately avoiding being forthright about something. The fishing boat was not speeding up, and it would take a while to pass them by. The vagrant on the roof was still watching. The delivery driver had not returned to his van.
"There's a schizophrenic woman on offer. She lived in the clinic, passed from a heart attack about a month ago,"
she said carefully, to see if Nagata would decline. In the bottle Cliff took off the shelf, several small spheres of different colors were orbiting a diaphanous filament of bright light, prodding it with little shocks. He didn't even have to hand it to Nagata before Shibone's suspicions were confirmed.
"No, thank you, but that is not the kind of soul I am looking for."
"In that case, I don't think I can help you."
Shibone threw her hands up apologetically. She knew exactly what he wanted, but she was no fool. Unless he asked for it specifically, she would not give it to him. A crack appeared in Nagata's mask. He looked over to the fishing boat, a nervous flash in his eyes. The vessel was now passing by the stall and was slowing down ever so slightly.
"Shibone, my dear, we have known each other for a long time," he began.
"Not long enough for me to be able to read your thoughts, good doctor."
Shibone smiled, but they both knew it was over. There was a moment of loaded silence. Cliff swallowed audibly, the padlock on his lips flashing in the light. The delivery van was first. Its doors swung open with force, and half a dozen men in black uniforms jumped out, pistols pointed at Shibone and her stall. The vagrant on the roof suddenly had a sniper rifle and positioned himself visibly. Last came the fishing cutter, doing a sharp turn toward the pontoon and spilling another half dozen officers onto it.
"I am sorry, Shibone, my dear, but they caught me."
Nagata bowed. His forehead was almost touching his knees.
"I had to cooperate. My family cannot be without a father."
"Traitorous pig," Shibone hissed, raising her hands and getting up from her chair slowly. One of the officers stepped forward. He wore a long coat and an inspector's cap. "Show us the contraband," he shouted, pointing at Cliff.
"Sir, I am sorry, but I do not know what you're talking about."
Shibone accentuated each word.
"Don't lie to me, ghostmonger. Where's the key?" the officer demanded.
"I wouldn't know. Do you mean the key to my flat, my car, my register?"
Shibone did not move a muscle. Frustrated, the inspector came around the counter. "Step back," he commanded, pointing for Shibone and Cliff to go to different corners of the stall. He pressed the button that would open the cash register and pulled the whole drawer out as far as possible with much more force than was necessary. A surly expression on his face, he rummaged through the hodgepodge of coins, caps, cards, bills, and gems for a few seconds before victoriously holding up a small key.
"There you are," he whispered.
Cliff's jaw trembled. The young man's eyes were gaining a sadistic gleam, and his arms were dropping slowly. Shibone stared at him so hard that he looked over, and the murder in his eyes was replaced by fear. If he snapped now, it wouldn't end well for him, and he knew it. The inspector walked over to Cliff and grabbed his jaw with a vice-like grip. Carefully, he inserted the key into the padlock, turned it, and removed it from Cliff's lips. "Open your mouth," he demanded. The young man obliged hesitantly, and the officer inspected him with a small flashlight. After a few moments, he turned it off and looked at Shibone with blank hatred. "It's empty," he finally said. Gesticulating, he turned around to the rest of his squad. "I said it's empty! Everybody go back to your stations." With a final glance at Shibone, he added,
"One day, ghostmonger, I will get you."
It took a mere minute for the officers to vacate the pontoon, slinking off with lowered heads. Shibone gave Cliff a careful look.
"We need to close up shop," she said. "That was a psychotic murderer you just swallowed, and we need to get him out of you before he takes over."
Cliff nodded, sweat running down his face. His eyelid was twitching with homicidal rage. Hopefully, they would make it in time.
If you liked this story and would like to hear more, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. A new short story is uploaded every Wednesday, and there will occasionally be another one in between if I find the time. Thank you very much for listening and have a great day.